Okay, we continue our series on Stoicism where we go through the Enchiridion in the translation How to Be Free, translated by Professor A.A. Long. Just in case you're interested, by no means required to use it, but there is an affiliate link to the book for Amazon in the description. No obligations to use it, but if you were thinking of picking it up, I would appreciate it if you do it through the affiliate link. Next chapter. This is a very short one, but I think one that can open up a nice bit of discussion. Chapter 27. No target is set up simply to be missed, and in the same way, nothing that occurs in the world is bad in its own nature as such. Bad. Kakos. Okay? This is vice. The opposite of arete. Virtue. And in the mind of a Stoic, and I think I've mentioned this enough times now, but I will do it again, virtue is good because it is the path to wisdom and to a happy and fulfilling life, and vice is bad because it will lead nowhere. Okay, so there are two interesting components in this very short chapter. One is nothing is necessarily bad. How did Shakespeare put it? Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That is an extremely Stoic viewpoint, right? And we've talked about that several times. Epictetus mentions that several times. Marcus Aurelius mentions that several times. Nothing is good, nothing is bad. Things just are. And the way you think about it makes it good or makes it bad. You have lost your job. Nobody likes it, but that is just a thing. If you think this is... Albert Ellis, the founder of rational emotive behavioral therapy, would say, if you awfulize and you say, this is awful, I cannot bear it, it's terrible, then you make it bad. If you say, I don't like this, but I'm going to do whatever I can to find a new job as soon as I can, then what's the problem? That doesn't mean that now everything is fine. That doesn't mean you have to like it. That doesn't mean everyone is happy now. But it's a big difference, right? So there is this. And this is a recurring theme in Stoicism because this is one of the pillars of Stoicism. Nothing is good. Nothing is bad. It's just how you interpret it. And the only thing that is good is virtue. And the only thing that is bad is vice. Okay? But a lot of things in the world, as we have discussed before, are indifferent. Take money. Money is neither good nor bad. You may know some really happy people who are actually quite poor, and you may know some really bad people who are actually really rich. So money is indifferent. You can be virtuous without money, you can be virtuous with money. You can follow the path of vice with money, or you can follow it without money. Irrespective of the amount of money you have, you can still choose to follow the path of virtue. Do the right thing, try to be a wise person, a sophos in Stoic terms, and then lead that rich and fulfilling life. Is that easier said than done? Absolutely. But where's the fun in not being challenged, right? This is the whole point. Stoicism is a philosophy of life, and you have to apply it all the time. It's very easy to be a Stoic if you are a millionaire and you have absolutely no problems in life. Or even simpler, if everything in your life is going smoothly, it's really, really easy to be a Stoic. It's much harder to be a Stoic when things go wrong. And people like Seneca would say, but that is exercise material. When something bad happens in your life, you can practice your Stoicism. Again, easier said than done, but a good weather Stoic is useless. It's pointless to only be a Stoic when things go well in your life. The whole point is to use Stoicism when things do not go so well in your life, right? Okay. Now, speaking of that, because I think that idea is not that complicated, does not necessarily need so much explanation because that is what it is, right? The whole point, everything we've been talking about in these videos is that idea. Some things are within your control, some things are not. There's things outside of your control you shouldn't worry about because it's pointless. You try to do the virtuous thing. That is another Stoic pillar. You try to be good. You try to be in charge of your emotions for as far as you can. That is a Stoic pillar, right? But now, because I noticed there are some misunderstandings, and I see that in the comments that you all leave me in these videos, which is very helpful because it shows me what I need to explain better. And it's interesting that Epictetus mentions an archer here, because I think this is that's a very good time to bring up a famous Stoic, we call that analogy, okay? Because I feel that this concept of some things are within your control, some things are outside your control, that doesn't sit too well with some people. And I understand that. Be very careful in how you interpret this, because it's very easy to fall into a very specific fallacy. I think the Stoics actually refer to that as the laziness fallacy, where you basically say, okay, not within my control, it's fine. I'm a student, I have to take a test. Not within my control whether I pass, I don't have to study. That is wrong. This is not what a Stoic would say. And if I've ever given that impression, then I deeply apologize, because that's not what Stoicism is about, okay? Same thing with a job interview. You cannot go in and say, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to leave a good impression. I don't have to prepare, because whether or not I get the job is not up to me anyway. Outside of my control, I don't have to care. No, that is really wrong and a gross misinterpretation of Stoicism. So let me try to rectify that one. A Stoic would say, you should do your best, always. That is the path to wisdom. Everything you do, you have to do as well as you can. And if you don't do that, you are remiss. You are very remiss. That is not how things work, okay? You just need to understand what is and what is not within your control. And that is difficult, okay? And this is where the archer comes in. Imagine that you are an archer. You have a bow, you have an arrow, okay? Now let's say you're aiming, you're hunting with your bow and arrow. These are ancient times. And you are trying to, shoot a deer, but a deer is a moving target, okay? Now a Stoic would say, you can be the most well-trained archer in the world, okay? So you know how to hold the bow, you know how to hold the arrow. I don't, I'm not an archer, so I have to make this up as I go. You know how to hold them, you know how to position them, you know how much force to exert on the bowstring. You know all these things, right? You have steady aim, so you will aim at the deer, you will do that as well as you can, and then you let go your arrow. And at that point, you're no longer in control. The deer could move, there could be a sudden gust of wind, whatever else can happen to the arrow. Maybe all of a sudden it starts to pour tremendous amounts of rain and the arrow is just affected by the hard rain that hits it. Whatever, the sky's the limit, right? So you're in control up to letting go of the arrow, and then it's no longer within your control. But up to a certain point, you're in control. Let's take this job interview, because I think that's an appealing example. Whether or not you get the job is not within your control, right? It's not within your control, because you are not part of your own hiring committee. That would be really strange. So that is not within your control. But you can do everything you can. In fact, you ought to do everything you can to make sure you get that job, right? You should make a good impression, and maybe you should dress up. You have to read up on the company. You have to be prepared for questions. You have to have a good CV. You have to show that you're appropriate for that job. You cannot go into that job interview and say, no, outside my control, doesn't matter. Well, it's not within my control, I don't have to worry about it, I don't have to do anything. Again, that is a gross corruption of Stoic thought. You are holding that arrow, and in your interview, you are holding that arrow. You are aiming it. But then you let go. You have done everything you can up to that point. But at some point you let go. Then it's no longer within your control. But if you are a shoddy archer, well, then you're always going to miss. It doesn't matter whether there's a gust of wind, because you don't know how, like me, I don't know how to fling an arrow, I don't know. So I would probably always miss the target, right? But you understand the analogy? I am in control as I'm holding that arrow. It's just that at some point I have to let it go, and then it's no longer within my control. Does this mean that I cannot improve the world because everything in the world is outside my control? Again, that is not what Stoicism says. Yes, Stoicism is a personal philosophy. And Stoicism says you improve yourself, and by improving yourself, you'll become a better person, and as a result, you can try to make other people better persons. But that's the point. But you can try to make other people better. So you cannot say, yeah, what other people do is outside my control, so it doesn't matter. That is too simplified. A Stoic is urged, Marcus Aurelius urges himself to do it, Epictetus urges himself to do it, Seneca urges people to do it. You are supposed to try to make people better. Maybe by telling them, you know what, you were doing this, I don't think that is the best approach to this. And I'm not talking about a job decision or like an occupational decision. I'm talking about behavior now. Maybe in the future, you could try to do this. But at the end of the day, it is up to the other person to then do that. That you are not in control of. But that does not mean that when you see some sort of gross injustice, you should think, no, other people, not up to me, it's not within my concern, I can't influence that, that's okay. Again, that is not how this works. That is not how Stoicism works. If you want to be a wise man or a wise woman, a wise person, then you should stand up for your ideals, and you should try to improve other people, and you should try to help people. And if you want to make changes in society or your neighborhood or whatever, you should try to do all of these things. As long as you realize that there will be a point where you have let go of your arrow and you can't influence it anymore. Even if there's a gust of wind and you are the best archer in the world, once the arrow is flung, you can't make it move anymore. Right? Then, and then only, it's no longer up to you. And that you have to accept. Because if you can't accept that at some point something is no longer within your control, then you are wrong. Because then you are going to be upset about something that is no longer within your control. And that is why Professor William Irvine says the Stoic dichotomy of things within your control and things without your control should be revised a little bit. He calls it the Stoic trichotomy. He says some things are not at all within your control, like the weather. It's pointless to get upset about the weather. It's nothing you can do about it. Some things are completely within your control. Like, for example, right now I'm talking to you, and what I'm saying is completely within my control, right? But then there are things that are not really within your control, but also not really outside of it. I cannot turn you into a Stoic, nor is that my aspiration. But the clearer I can make my talk, the more you may think, well, there's a point to that. It's not within my control whether you believe me, nor do I ask you to believe me. But the more coherent I am, the better my arguments are, the more likely I am to influence you. Right? And I think Professor Irvine takes the example of a tennis match. Whether you win may not be entirely up to you, but if you train, you give yourself a better chance. And that is up to you. In the end, whether you win may not be up to you, but you can give yourself the best sort of fighting chance by training, by working hard. So that is kind of in the middle, right? Not entirely up to you, but also not entirely not up to you. The Stoic trichotomy. And I think that modernization is actually a very nice way to think about the things within and not within your control. Okay. I hope this was useful. I hope this has given you some food for thought. And I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye.